All right. Well, today we have on Miss Shannon Dalton. She's an English teacher at Carroll County High School. A little preface: me and Ethan both have had her as an English teacher. And this has been an interview that's been a long time coming.
It has.
We actually wanted to interview you from the very beginning. You're going to be one of our first.
Yes, and I was both honored and scared. And I should have gone on and been brave and taken the initial interview.
Absolutely. We're here today.
Yep.
And we're very excited. I think it's an honor to speak with you today.
Of course.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So we always start the same way. Where did you grow up?
Here.
Yeah.
It's this, I don't even know that I've come full circle because my circle's been so here. I was born here at the Galax Hospital and went to Gladeville Elementary, Woodlawn Intermediate, was in the last 9th grade class at Woodlawn, and came here to the high school and graduated from here in '96, and went to college in Lynchburg at Randolph-Macon Woman's College, now deceased, and taught for 1 year in Richmond in Henrico County and came right back the next year, worked at the Gazette for a year, the Galax Gazette, and worked at the Carroll News in high school. And then I've been here ever since. So since 2002.
And what did your parents do for work?
Well, that's an interesting question. They're all here as well. My parents were in the first class to graduate from Carroll County High School.
Okay. Wow.
So my mom was a Woodlawn kid, and my dad was a Hillsville kid. So I don't guess any of the whole line would be here without this high school. And they went to Wytheville Community College, and they actually, it was kind of cool. My dad was in the first program that they had for engineering. It was kind of a hybrid thing they did. And so he worked at the Norfolk Naval Shipyards right after college. And my mom did nursing at Wytheville. And I think if you go in Galax Hall at Wytheville, you can see the old nursing pictures. And I think she was in maybe the 3rd class of nurses from Wytheville. And so she worked, they moved to Newport News, and he worked at the shipyard. I said Norfolk, Newport News. He worked at the Newport News shipyard and then enlisted. And so they came back, and he was in the Galax Army 424th and started working my dad worked at Volvo. And he was one of the very first people at Volvo when the plant opened. And my mom worked at Twin County Hospital and then went to several doctor's offices. She's an RN. And then she actually came back later when we started our school nursing program and became one of the first school nurses. So she was at Gladeville.
Really?
There's probably a lot of people who had Nurse Connie at Gladeville. And so that's what they did. And my dad died in 2018. And at that time, he was the longest serving employee of Volvo North America.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was an honor that I'm sure meant a great deal to him.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But never retired. He was died in office. So, but he loved what he did, and like I say, and so Mom retired when Bradley was born, and so she was the school nurse for quite some time at Gladeville, and then retired.
Now, was WCC affiliated with Virginia Tech at that point?
Yes, they were. And Dad's degree that he got was a combined program. It's a Wytheville degree, but it was one of these combined programs that they did with Virginia Tech.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that he was in the Galax Army?
Yes.
How did that work?
Army 424th. And that was always something to be proud of. They did Army transportation, and he served in the first Gulf War.
Okay.
And the 424th went, and they were there for, I want to say, around a year that they worked in Saudi Arabia.
So it's like a platoon
I have
based out of
family,
Galax?
Yeah.
I have family that were in there.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
And they're still there, actually. You can go, if you go out the other side of Galax and go down Armory Road, you'll come to the 424. So they did Army transportation, and they were camped out in the desert in Tent City and did all the transportation. And they also served, he had a tour in Germany, so they got to go to Germany and do things. And
I have some family that's in that reserve unit that served in Iraq, both wars.
yeah,
So
and so, and you'll find a lot of people my age that have family members that were over there. So we've got a photo album, and it's really interesting to look at because they were right there with all those oil fires and stuff, and you see the oil fires in the background, and they were transporting things. And he didn't talk about the level of safety that they were not in, but so they did a pretty long stint there and overseas, and had a big homecoming. That was all a huge thing for the area at the time. So.
And did they hold that in Galax?
Yeah,
Last year?
it was cool, and had a big parade and all that good stuff. So it was fun. It was great for everybody to be home safe, but
Yeah.
it was also really nice to see the support for
Right.
for the troops and local people. You know,
Right.
who went and saw a part of the world that the rest of us will probably never see.
Yeah.
So it's really neat.
Was there a particular subject that you had a passion for in school?
That's a good question too. So I don't even know how to tell these kind of. Who knows? So I would have to say English, and the credit goes to Lois Goad, who is an incredible English teacher. Loved that woman, and I would love for my classes to be like her classes because we worked so hard and we learned so much. And I know I fall short of what she was doing, but she did awesome things in her classes. And I joined the English Mac team and had Mac as a quiz bowl program for anybody who doesn't know. And joined English Mac. She was the coach, and we wanted to win, and we did, and we did great. But I also went to the Southwest Virginia Governor's School, which was new in the early 90s, and had a notion that physics was my thing. And it turned out that physics wasn't my thing. So here I am back teaching English. I had an uncle, great uncle, who worked on the Hubble Space Telescope. And so I grew up a space kid, and he was in Huntsville. So you go to Huntsville to the NASA facilities there. And so I, just loved it. And I would have loved to have done that, but I needed to be better at math. So I'm not.
Were you a big reader as a child?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And I mean, it was the 80s. What we're going to do, we read. But yeah, I loved to read books when I was a kid. Sit up in your room and read stuff. That was always a fun thing. And the library at Gladeville and the library at Woodlawn, those were one of our favorite places. Anybody who got to see Woodlawn in its glory days, it had this really cool sunken library with windows. And yeah, we were there a lot. Yeah.
Did they ever open up the glass ceiling at Gladeville while you were there?
So when I was there, it was still a courtyard. Gladeville was a square, and the courtyard was open to the outdoors. Yeah, at the time. A lot of the elementary schools here were like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was that kindergarten through 5th grade while you were
Fourth
there?
grade.
Fourth grade.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
they didn't shift it. 5th grade was at Woodlawn. Woodlawn went 5-9, and the year that we moved, I think, was the year they shifted all the grades. So that would have been 92, maybe.
Wow.
I
didn't
think
realize that.
92. The end of the school year there.
Okay.
So,
Did you have a particularly favorite book
a favorite book from childhood or in general?
from that period of your life, childhood?
You know what? Anne of Green Gables stands out, and I don't know why, but I love that series.
Have you watched the show?
I have not, but yeah, the Anne of Green Gables series. I know I particularly enjoyed those. Island of the Blue Dolphins was a great book. There was a lot. Little House on the Prairie, not to go all classic on us here, but Little House on the Prairie was great. I just told my kids the other day that it was shameful that they had not worked their way through at least Little House in the Big Woods. But that was a great series. And that TV show, yeah, that was definitely watched the Little House on the Prairie TV show. Awesome.
We often ask this. What was your earliest memory?
Wow.
Discussing childhood.
That's a hard one. What would that be? I don't know. I'll have to think on it to remember. That one's you've asked me one that stumped me. I don't know. Kindergarten at Gladeville, I remember Sandy Harvey. She had a lot of trouble on her hands with me. I was not the best kindergartner. But I knew I got in trouble at nap time a lot because nap time was super boring. Yeah. And I remember those little red mats and all the random things I did to get in trouble nap time in kindergarten. And maybe if you think back before that, I mean, there's school memories, I think, in a lot of ways, are some of the first things that stand out. I did preschool at the Methodist Church in Galax, and I remember we made paper bag pumpkins and stuff like that, so those were happy memories. Good times. We had a little neighborhood crew of kids, and we'd all hang out, and so it was a nice little neighborhood with friends. So
It's a different time.
yeah, We go ride. We had a neighbor who had a flat driveway, so that's a bonus.
Yeah.
And all the neighborhood, she had no kids our age. Her kids were older, but all the kids would show up to ride in her driveway because it was flat. And then she'd let us come in her house, and she'd make us lunch. Never invited us, but we were always welcome.
Yeah.
Banny Jennings, who lived across the street, and she would make egg sandwiches, and we'd all have a big time. So yeah, stuff like that. Yeah. Playing badminton in the yard, just messing in the yard in general. Yep.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I've got one brother. His name is Rick, and he is he graduated from Tech. He's in mechanical engineering, and he works in Roanoke with a firm, and they do spec out renovations for schools, churches, other projects, and he does a lot of engineering things on the side.
And is he older or younger?
He's younger.
Okay.
He graduated from Carroll County. I graduated in '96, and he was in '99.
Okay.
And so, and his wife also, she's a pharmacist at Carillion Roanoke Memorial.
Yeah.
And her name's Julie, and she graduated also in '99. And my husband graduated in '94. So, again, we're
all together.
We've all been here.
Yeah.
So
It is funny with this school you did, and it's with my family. I'm sure with yours too. You can trace back.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
It's my great grandma went here, or went to
Yeah.
Hillsville, but
Yep.
still in the same school system. It goes all the way back. So really, the whole entire family tree. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I wouldn't claim to be an Appalachian scholar by any means, but just this notion of place, the Appalachian people feel this strong sense of place. And you go other places and you do other things, but somehow you gravitate back to your anchor spot. And
we talked quite extensively about that with Donna Ogle
Yeah.
last week. We got to interview her, and I think she actually got a master's degree. in
She
Appalachian
did.
Studies.
Yeah.
She was just talking about the Appalachian mindset and how people really have a strong social tie to home.
Absolutely. And you go other places and you just don't feel quite that same connection because you grow up with connections. You kind of come to anticipate connections, and then you go other places and other, even just, ways away. Like the year I lived in Richmond, and we lived in kind of a neighborhoody area. You'd see some of the same people out, but people don't introduce themselves. They don't make connections like we're used to here.
Right.
Here we talk to everybody.
Yeah.
We don't meet strangers, so
Did you ever think that you were going to move away, or did you think that you were going to come back here?
I don't know what I honestly don't know what I thought I was going to do. My college degree is in journalism, and I worked for the Lynchburg newspaper in college, the News in Advance. I did a extended internship there, and had a job offer there actually. And I worked in radio in college, and I worked at summers at the Galax radio station, and I had a couple of offers there too. And the only problem with journalism is it doesn't pay anything. So at that time, teaching paid more than journalism. So but I had both things. I had prepared in college for both of them, and I just wasn't quite sure what direction. But believe it or not, the radio market in Richmond didn't really want somebody with a Carroll County accent.
Yeah.
The only job offer I got was at an AM country gold station.
Yeah.
So nobody in the FM market wanted somebody who sounded like this.
Yeah.
Even though it's probably less than it was at the time, but they weren't looking for that sound. So so I went with teaching, and I've been on that path ever since.
Did you know what you wanted to do in high school?
So
your senior year?
My high school yearbook at the time let you put ambitions, and mine said that I was going to be an English, physics, and band teacher, and a hotshot reporter for a big city newspaper, but not necessarily in that order. That's what it said. So I've been an English teacher and a reporter for Lynchburg, which not a big city, but so I've checked off 2.
Yeah.
Physics, we were going to just ignore that one. So that only leaves band director, and it's a little late in life for that one maybe, but we'll see.
You can live vicariously through your children.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But no, I wouldn't say that I knew. I think I was open to a lot of possibilities. I think college was a big direction for that. And I think I would say to people here at the high school, and I hope I say to people, that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have the plan. And in fact, sometimes I think it's harder when you do have the plan, that then you feel disappointed. Then you feel like you didn't achieve what you wanted to. And I think growing up here is hard because we don't see a lot of professions that are possible. We don't see a lot of jobs that are out there. We see the things that our parents do. We see the things that our teachers do, that our friends' parents do. We don't realize that even just in Winston-Salem or in Roanoke or Lynchburg or, in Bluefield or other places even just that close by, that there are all these other professional possibilities. And so I think when we go to college thinking that the professions are the ones we grew up seeing, medical professions, educational professions, law enforcement, and those, we need those. But there's so much more that we're not used to seeing. So I think when I got to college and realized that there were a lot of options. Now, did I end up picking education? I mean, yes, but you meet professors who kind of guide you in different directions. You make connections with professors. You take classes you weren't anticipating taking, and you pick up things there that are interesting. My school had junior year was either study abroad or internship. So you either got like a really nice internship for a semester or you went abroad for a semester junior year. So I did the internship at the Lynchburg newspaper. But I really think college helps you see those things. A friend of mine, her daughter just finished her freshman year, and she went in, I think, thinking she would do something in math, something nebulous in math, and now she's on the path of meteorology. And, who would think meteorology is kind of random, but that's just where she ended up making connections and ended up feeling like that was her path to success. And I think that's really cool. And so I think you have to stay open to the options. It's good to have some ideas of your strengths and weaknesses. But I think when we go in really set in a mindset that we kind of do ourselves a disservice there in a way, because you don't know, you don't know what's out there. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know what opportunities are going to happen, what doors are going to open. So you just kind of, I'm a go with the flow kind of person in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways. And I think that, you just, if you'll be open to see what are your strengths and where is it taking you, that you might find some avenues you weren't expecting.
So you always knew you wanted to go to college?
Yeah, that absolutely, 100%. And I was a nerdy kid. I was a nerdy kid. I liked school. I enjoyed being good at school and being good at classes and being the best that I could be at school. So yeah, absolutely, definitely. But even in college, I didn't have any particular set idea where I was going to go. And I went to an all-women's school, which is not typical, even though here in our faculty at the high school, we're lucky. Miss Mitchell went to Hollins, Miss Goad went to Hollins. So we do have 3 women's college graduates, which is a pretty high percentage given the number of graduates women's schools are turning out. But my mom and I kind of got in the car and just started making some stops at schools, and we went through Lynchburg, and we went to Lynchburg College, and we went to Randolph-Macon Women's College, and the difference between those two were just night and day. And I think that Randolph-Macon really stuck because it was a small school, and it was under 1,000 people, and it was a lot like here. You made real friends. You were friends with your professors. You were friends with the janitor in your building. You were friends with everybody, and so it was really familiar. And it's just the right place to be. And a lot of people write off small schools for a couple of reasons. The price tag looks scary. Sometimes you look at their options and you think they don't have the option I'm looking for. But a lot of times those schools are able to craft a major for you. And you can work with the professors in your discipline and work with the professionals around in the area and come up with things that end up suiting what you need. And I loved the small school. And again, maybe people avoid it because there's a level of accountability there too. We worked hard. And I had a physics class my freshman year. It had three people in it. And so if you didn't come, you're getting a phone call from the professor, hey, we're having class. And I didn't do that because I saw him do it to someone else. So I never did that. But yeah, you didn't. There was a level of responsibility there for your showing up and being a part of what you were doing. So But yeah, I didn't exactly know. William and Mary's I got my William and Mary picture over there. I think that was my short list always, was William and Mary, until I started looking around at other schools. And I think I would have loved William and Mary, but I just, you found a place that fit and you went with it.
Did your parents encourage you to do well in school?
Oh yeah, absolutely. 100%. I'm always telling people I'm not old, but I'm getting there, But I feel like we were in that generation where your parents expected you to come to school, to do your best. I always tell Bradley and Will, my kids, that, don't ever be the person that makes a teacher have a bad day, right? Go there to present your best self and do what you can do, And, I was an overachiever. So being a teacher, when you step back into that role, you then realize that the overachievers are a small percentage, and that the rest of the school is somewhere between, I can't believe you made me come today, and so you have to start to figure out all the different spectrum of how to try to get people to be interested, to want to succeed, because not everybody's motivated to do that. So, so coming from a background of get it done, do it right. Yeah. My dad was measure 5 times and cut once, right?
Yeah.
Do it right. So that was something that's eye-opening, is how do you get through to the other people who don't have that intrinsic motivation?
Right,
But yeah.
Do you feel like your college experience gave you what you needed to work in there?
Yeah, all that and then some, absolutely. And I was not looking for a women's school. I did not have that on my radar. My husband, Brad Dalton, he graduated from Hampden-Sydney, which is an all-men's school. And he worked for Tom Jackson, who also went to Hampden-Sydney. The McGrady family, lawyers in town, also Hampden-Sydney graduates. And so he was already there. And again, I wasn't, looking for the single-sex education, but it was just one of the schools that I looked at. And, you might think it's weird at first. You might be like, oh, I don't know about that. But it's not your life that's single sex. It's your education, it's your classroom setting. And it really does push you. When you're in a room of other women, to have your, speak up, communicate differently, go about things differently. And I think it does give you a confidence that you might not come away from regular public education or regular co-ed education. I think it gives you some confidence. We definitely worked hard, definitely well-rounded. I had a great communication program. We really get into rhetoric, get into the history of journalism, all of those things. My minor was in politics. And that was a fun time to have a politics minor, right? In the mid-90s, coming off of the Clinton years and all that good stuff. It was definitely a good background, and I very much prepared. Now, my master's degree is from Virginia Tech, and I did that once I was working here in the school system.
It's in school administration?
It is in English education.
Oh, okay.
English education. So several teachers did those degrees at the same time. Stacy Whitaker in the math department, Robin Graham, who used to be in our social studies department. We all carpooled together and did that. And so we all have masters of education in our different subject areas.
Okay.
So English education. And that was another interesting thing, because we're working, so we're trying to, and this was before virtual classes, you guys, like, again, not old, but it's before virtual classes. It was before you could do things online. The universities hadn't shifted to that. So we're cutting out the door every day at 3:30 and driving to Blacksburg and picking up night classes and trying to squeeze all those in.
It's hard.
Trying to find a place to park on campus.
So you drove to Blacksburg every day?
We drove at least 3 days a week
Wow.
to Blacksburg and did classes, and most everything. They were able to work they had the 5-year masters that they were just starting for their education majors. And we did a different type of master's, and they worked with us to do that because they knew we were already in the public school system. So it was a good program, but the English department at Virginia Tech was also a fun place. Got to meet some celebrities. Nikki Giovanni is the poet in residence there at Tech. So I got to meet her one time, which was really cool. She came, after Hurricane Katrina, she had a poetry reading fundraiser, because that's, I guess, what English people do, right?
Yeah.
So we got to meet her at that. She came to our class afterwards, and so it was
That's neat.
that was cool.
Yeah.
It was very cool, and we had a lot of good classes in that department. So that was a whole different experience. I think because Miss Whitaker's correct me if I'm wrong, Emory and Henry graduate,
Okay.
and she and I had that small experience, and then we go to tech, and you have a class, and at the end of the class, all those people are gone. The professor is gone, everybody's gone, and you don't see them again. And so that was really a mental adjustment for us, because we were used to kind of a network and a family, and I remember I had a class one time, and all these people brought food at the end of the class, and I was like, oh, great, a party, whatever. But then you realize it was because they were saying goodbye, and you never saw these people again.
Right.
They were all gone, and it wasn't because they graduated. It was just because the university is so large.
Took a different class.
Yeah, you moved on to somewhere else, and they were gone. So that was a different experience, but valuable in another way, because it kind of ended up that I had the undergraduate experience at a small school, had a graduate experience as a working adult at a large university.
Right, yeah.
So 2 totally different spectrums of higher education.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to go back and get a master's?
Well, I really wanted to be in the Wytheville Community College system and do the dual credit classes. So that was the primary motivation. The teacher who was doing it was retiring, and I saw the opportunity
Yeah.
and wanted to do that. And I think all 3 of us were kind of motivated by that, to be able to teach some of the dual credit and Wytheville classes.
Absolutely. If you could pick one class from your college education that was most beneficial to you, what would that class be?
Wow, hard question. That's interesting. This is a weird thing to say, maybe, but I had a European history class that was just, I guess that was an area that we miss in undergrad, in public schools and that kind of thing. That was a really great class. The professor was actually someone who had lived through World War II herself, and she had a lot of personal stories about living in Europe and World War II. That class was just kind of eye-opening, because I think that was a class that really started to help me put the timeline of history in perspective, and to be able to sort of meaningfully connect the dots between things that have happened over time and how they all go together. And so for that reason, that class, it was an interesting, very interesting class, but that was also really helpful. I had a civil rights class that was really good. And we, again, eye-opening. I think you come out of the public school system and you think you know a lot, and then you realize you don't. I had a class on African politics that my professor had actually been in Africa and had worked in these elections and that type of thing. So he had so much firsthand experience from people. One of my favorite professors, my 2 communication professors, were Carla Heath and Jim Hoban. And any of their classes, they really taught you about how to consider people's points of view, how to consider your argument, how to consider their argument, how to take in information from other people. One of the books we read, and again, this was in the 90s, was this I think it's James Borstein, I think you're the right author. It was called The Image. And it was an early book talking about how people preferred to see images of things than be at the real things. And, look at where we're at now, right? Because this guy was upset about watching the Macy's parade on TV versus being at the Macy's parade. And what were we doing? Adding these levels of separation. And, now you feel like you can expect to see a video of anything. Something happened, you're like, well, I'll Google it and find that, and we'll get a video of it. So it's like you can't accept that you're not going to be able to find what you're looking for, right? Yeah. So it's really interesting. But yeah, the communication department there was great. The political department was great. I don't know. They all were just, I can find things from all of them. Wrote a really cool research paper about game shows one time.
I think you've mentioned that.
Yeah, that was awesome. I wrote one about odd locations for McDonald's, and that was cool too. Like, there was a McDonald's at that time on a ski slope. There was one in an airplane, like a 747 that had a McDonald's location. So it was, it's just such a wide variety of things to learn. I had an Asian film class
Wow.
that we would watch these films, and one of them was like 3 hours long, and it was a Buddhist film with no words. A 3 hour film with no words. I can't remember the title of it, but it was very interesting. So I appreciate the scope of the different types of experiences and worldviews that you were able to learn about.
Did you have to do a thesis for either of your
Absolutely,
degrees?
and for your radio listeners, we're sitting in my classroom, and it's actually in my drawer.
Okay.
Bradley could open the drawer and bring it over here. I keep it with me at all times.
Really?
I do, and I guess that's maybe, I don't know, but I'm very proud of it. It was a study of local news, and it was a study of the Carroll News and the Gazette. And the content of those two papers, and how the different content, if at all, shaped our community. Like, how did it reflect how we see ourselves in our community? How did it reflect the types of things we talk about as citizens of our community? Was our local news overly negative, overly positive? And again, that was at what I might say is the last golden age of the local newspapers, because it's really sad what's happening to publications right now. And I don't know if I were Alan Worrell at the Carroll News or if I were Brian Funk at the Gazette. I mean, both those guys have been great friends to me over the years. I don't know how I'd be feeling, or what direction, if I'm trying to think my way clear as to what direction does it go from here. How are you financially solvent if your subscribers are all online? When people don't expect to pay for your local content online, they get angry with you for wanting money for your local content. Whereas they didn't mind shilling a quarter for your paper, but I don't know where that goes. But yeah, so it was kind of the golden age of news reporting. I don't know what their subscription numbers would have been at the time, but I'd say we're among their highest points for subscription numbers. I was just telling a story the other day, because I worked at the Carroll News in high school, and there'd be one day a week they'd bring in the coins from the newspaper boxes and dump them all on the conference room table, and all of us would have to sit and roll coins. And you're spending an hour with 4 or 5 people rolling coins. That's the amount of business those newspaper boxes were doing. And now the Postal Service has bumped newspaper boxes off their property. You can't even buy your paper at the post office. So the paper was a comparison of the Gazette and the Carroll News, and how they approach news, the types of stories that they cover. And, part of that you find out is governed. The Gazette was coming out 3 days a week. The Carroll News is once a week. So the Carroll News can't be as timely as the Gazette. And in an effort to be timely, I think the Gazette is going to cover more of your things like car wrecks and crime reports and stuff like that, because they had the ability to do that. And if you think 1996 is going to be mostly pre any kind of social media. So if you wanted to know about the car wreck, or you wanted to know about the thefts or the house fire or whatever it was, you waited for that local paper to find out what happened. And now you're not, that same, now you're going to Scanner Food or Facebook to see who took a picture as they drove by. So all these citizen journalists, if we want to call it that, I mean, in a loose sense, have taken that job away, right? So I don't know, but that was my senior paper. So I actually, I don't know if any of you guys know like that. It used to be Woodlawn Battery Mart, and I went in there one day, and I don't even remember why, but they had old copies of the Gazette and Carroll News upstairs, like really old ones. Even the Gazette under some of the different mastheads before it was Galax Gazette. And so I bought all those old papers that they had. So I have that whole stash of papers, those old papers. And I did a lot of research into the history of the Carroll News and of the Gazette and, the Carroll News. And before that, you kind of find that your local papers would have been like itinerant printers. And so somebody would come into your town, they'd hang out for a couple of weeks, talk to people, type up a paper, sell it. They might do that once or twice, and then they move on. People had a press, and so when they established a permanent press here in Hillsville, that was pretty cool. And some of the earlier people to be in charge of that was a lady named Belva Goad, who would do a lot of the printing.
Yeah, I
So-
think Alan may have mentioned her. when we
Yeah,
interviewed her.
Byram and Belva Goad would do a lot of that printing themselves. So that was, it was really neat. But long history. And Ina Horton. I worked for Ina when I was at the Carroll News. So the Carroll News has had a long stretch of women in charge of their paper, which is kind of cool as well. To do that, but we're lucky that Alan and David are so plucky and keep providing us with our local paper, whether people appreciate it as much as they should, but it's a whole new generation of people. So, you go down 5 years from where I'm at and you come to the cutoff point of people who were going to the local paper for news.
Right.
So it's kind of, I'm right on that cusp of digital to traditional.
Not quite a millennial.
Not there, no, but also like things would change just in the wake of things. My wedding pictures were print, and the next year I bought a digital camera,
Yeah.
So at Kmart in Mount Airy, it was a Kodak. And look where Kodak is at now, right? Like Kodak, not even a thing anymore,
I don't even
really.
know what Kodak is.
Yeah, and Kodak was your gold standard for photography and film and
They had
that
great
type.
posters, old posters.
Yeah.
The Kodak posters were beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely, and and so now it's like another one. It's like Sears Roebuck, like all these things.
Is it a play on words for a Kodak?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never looked that up.
Might be
We'll find out.
interesting.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. We can have Bradley Google it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know, but that was my senior paper, my research. So I went through and coded headlines and did all this stuff. So I did the research on the history of the papers and then on the content of the papers. And that was interesting because then I went on to work for the Gazette for a year after that. So you have that in the back of your head.
It seems like, to me, a lot of the bigger schools don't have their students do a thesis for the bachelor's degree. The smaller schools like Randolph-Macon and Hollins, like Miss Mitchell, she had to do a thesis, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that could be a beneficial part of education that people are missing.
Senior seminar was great because it was all the people in your major that were working on research issues that were of particular interest to them. And then you had like a whole big presentation and everybody presented their research. So on top of the paper, you also had to have, a presentation for the public, and we had a performance, if you will, right, where you presented all those things. So it was really great. And not only that, but you were spending time with people who were deep into research on other things, so you got to know some of their topics as well. So
You mentioned your husband. When did you meet him?
here
Yeah.
here in 1994, it was a Mac Mance. He was on the social studies Mac team, and Ken Blevins, who is another one of my very favorite teachers of all times, was across the hall, and we were with Lois Goad across the hall, and so you just see people in passing at practice, and then get to talking, and one thing leads to another, and here we are, however many years later.
And did y'all date all through your college?
Yes, yes, indeed.
How
It
far
was-
were y'all away from?
So I was here for 2 years, and he was at Hampden-Sydney for 2 years, and then I was in Lynchburg for 2, and he was in Farmville for 2, and then I was in Lynchburg for another 2 while he was in Richmond for 2. So we just kept moving an hour, 2 hours away from each other, 3, about 3 hours each time. And then I went to Richmond for 1 year while he finished college, and I worked at Fairfield Middle School in Richmond, and he finished his year at University of Richmond. And then he really wanted to be back in this area. It was important to him to come back and be a part of this community. And so once he finished law school, he wanted to be back here. So he did law school at the University of Richmond.
Were y'all married by that point?
No, we got married in 2001, and it was September the 8th. And so we were on a cruise ship in Key West, Florida, on September 11th. And so it was really, I guess this is our American-centric view of things. If you've been on a cruise ship, most of the staff on cruise ships are not U.S. citizens. They're foreign citizens. And so we were at breakfast, and again, this was 2001. So the TVs are small. They're like the old cathode ray TVs
Right,
up in the corner. And we saw the boat staff kind of looking at the TV, and we could see a building was on fire. We could definitely see a building had been bombed in some sense. But we were short and couldn't see over people and pretty far away from it, and didn't really get a sense of what was going on. And we went ahead and disembarked and got off in Key West and went into a candy store that was near the ship, and that's where we saw the TV and realized what was happening. And at that time only one building had been hit. And Brad, being a history person, he had wanted to go to the little White House in Key West. So I said, well, let's just walk that way. And, so we got down to the little White House, and all the volunteers there were kind of huddled at a radio. And they were like, we're not going to do any tours today. And we're like, yeah, totally. And so we just sat there with them at the little White House and listened to the radio for quite some time.
Must have been scary.
Before we left finally and came back. So we stayed with them for a decent little while. And as we were walking back, I just remember, because again, this was just right on the edge of technology things, and so payphones were still very much used and necessary, and so businesses were closing, people were jammed into payphones, lines were out the door at their payphones, and we got back to the boat, and the captain got everybody together and wanted to kind of brief everybody. And again, the ship is also a foreign vessel, so it's not a U.S. vessel. And so they had decided that the best course was to go ahead and go. Their next destination was Cozumel, and they were like, "We're just going to go on because we feel like the things are calmer down there, and
right.
we're safer anchor in Cozumel." So we went on, but it was really hard because the TV on the boat was satellite feed directly from New York. So you're getting the New York channels and their coverage of it. So it was really personal, with the journalists and the reporters that were on air for them. So that was a very interesting experience.
So y'all went down to Cozumel?
We did.
And how long did you stay there after?
Not that long. It was a short trip because we were young and cheap, and so we could afford maybe 3 days. So I think we were there a day. We were at Key West a day, and there a day, and then a day at sea. So we came back into the port of Miami the day that ports reopened in the U.S. And actually, we were detained by the Coast Guard for quite some time. It was a long time until we got off the boat. And what we didn't know was they had a person of interest on the boat. Now, whether this person was really of interest or not, no one could say at this point. But that had tacitly made the CNN newswire. And so people up here, our family, who can't contact us by cell phone because it was 2001, are slightly unnerved because they all know that they're detaining a Carnival cruise ship in the port of Miami. And we're clueless. We're just waiting around. We don't know what's happening. So, but we could see the police boats and the lights outside the ship from time to time. But nothing happened. It was
still scary, I bet.
Yeah, but it was, And we had a friend, our friend Chris Nobley, our flight was canceled from Miami to Atlanta, obviously, that day. So Chris had been able to rent us a car, so we were able to get a rent-a-car and drive through a tropical storm back to Greensboro to collect our own car. So we drove from Miami to Greensboro.
Wow.
That's not a short drive.
Not at all, especially in a tropical storm following you most of Florida. But it made for an interesting story to repeat.
So were you working for the paper at this
Yes,
time?
I was working for the paper. And that was also kind of interesting because there were a handful of Galax connections to the September 11th bombings.
Really?
There was, I did an interview with a Galax High School graduate who was in New York. And I cannot remember the guy's name, but he was talking about how he'd been in the area nearby, and so he had seen all the debris. He had initially started walking toward it, thinking there was something he could do. But then when he got there, he kind of watched some of the firefighters and the police, and realized that he just needed to get out of their way, and left. But yeah, he was there firsthand and saw pretty close to the scene, things that were happening.
Are you familiar with Casey Neistat?
I'm not.
He lived in New York during 9/11, and he has a video of his camcorder because he had a blog, or a vlog, I guess, that he did for several years, and the first plane hitting.
Oh, wow.
And it's just
wow.
crazy.
And yeah, this poor guy was very deeply affected just by what he did see.
Yeah.
It was, you could definitely tell. But yeah, so I did that interview. That was an eventful year for the Twin Counties. We had the Betty Jean Angeline murders that year, which drew all kinds of national media. And that was, my beat was Grayson County. And so that was really a hard time for Grayson County, because there was 2 women who were murdered, and for a long time no one had any clue who it was or what had happened, or was there a killer on the loose in the community. And so it was an unnerving time for them in Grayson County. And that was an interesting one because they had some leads, and I think the investigators probably privately had leads sooner than the public had leads, obviously. But the thing that sealed the deal was an envelope that she mailed to the Gazette, and they got her DNA off the envelope. Wow. And were able to close in on the true killer. So never lick your envelopes if you're going to send information about the murders you committed. So, but yeah, it was an interesting year. My year at the Gazette was had several interesting stories, but that was probably the one that was maybe the biggest ticket for the area.
Which school did you start working at in the county?
I've always been here.
Okay.
Yep. Always been here. I came here, so I worked my 1 year at the Gazette. Nice. And at the time I was at the Gazette, we ran the press. And so I got a call on press day, and you never wore nice clothes to work on press day because ink's going to be everywhere. Right. And they said, hey, if you can get to Hillsville in the next 30 minutes, we've got an interview slot. And I said, fine, I'm going to be covered in ink. And drove from Galax to here, covered in ink, and sat down and did an interview and got that job. And that was only supposed to, the teacher was out on a 1 year leave. But Eddie Chitwood, a man of legend and wisdom, Eddie said to me, take it because she won't come back. And he was right, because she was out on maternity leave and then wanted to stay with her kids. And he was right. And so I've been here ever since. So that was...
Did you start in this room as well?
Actually, just next door in Miss Wright's room, old room, which is now a math classroom. But yeah, so I've been in 2 places. I got to move here when I came to yearbook. And so this was Lois Dalton's room. And I always joked that Mr. Patton just was like, oh, well, I've got another Dalton, so I'll just plug Shannon Dalton in for Lois Dalton, and we'll just switch all the stuff over, and it'll still say Dalton. And so I came here and did yearbook, and I did yearbook for a long, long time until Miss Edwards took it. She took over in 2018, so I had quite a long run at that. Maybe 12. I might have done 12 books, I think. Yep, and 2 national championships. So, just free plug for national championships.
How is teaching here different than teaching in Richmond?
Well, first off, middle school is a whole nother world.
That's true.
So it's hard to compare middle school to high school. One thing that struck me at the time in Richmond, my school was in Henrico County, which is a wealthy county, but it was a school that was on the east end of town. It's a heavily minority populated school, and the funding for schools at that time in Henrico County, and I'm sure it's different now, but at that time, a lot of the schools on our side of the county hadn't been renovated, didn't have the things that the other schools had. Like, I would go to a workshop, and another middle school would have a parent lounge with couches and donuts and orange juice for parent volunteers, and they had all kinds of fancy things, and we didn't have that yet. I feel certain that things are different there now, but at that time it was there's a lot of disparity in the renovation process and that type of thing, and that's different than here, because here we've got a limited number of schools, and there they've got a nearly unlimited compared to us number of schools. So but it was, I would not say it was significantly different in the fundamentals. It was hard because our school in Richmond had a really high staff turnover rate, which I myself contributed to at the end of the year. But really high turnover rate, really low rate of substitutes that would come work in the building. Maybe just ahead of the curve on where a lot of the schools are at now. I think a lot more schools maybe are now or where they were then, because we covered other teachers' classes pretty much every day. You hardly ever had planning to yourself. And here, really, we have we're lucky. That we have a strong network of subs and people who are willing to come into our buildings and help us out. So we don't have, we don't see that here like we did there, but it was definitely always something. I was in a group of 4 teachers. We taught in like little subject area pods, and 2 of my teachers were military who had done career switcher. One was older, one was younger, and one was a teacher who had about 3 years of experience. So we had 3 new teachers and one with 3 years of experience. And the teacher had experience, got reassigned. Her husband was military. She got reassigned, so she was gone, and that was the math class. And they had subs the whole rest of the year in that math class. They never hired anybody. The older man who did career switcher, he left in December of that year. And so that left myself and the other career switcher, and she'd been in a chemistry lab in industry and then come in. So
Large change.
so it was definitely, I'm grateful for that year because nothing that has happened since has been as interesting as that year.
Gave you some perspective.
It definitely gives you some perspective. We have lots of things to be grateful for here.
Have you always been 11th grade here?
No, I've done everything, virtual. I'd had one 9th grade class one time. So I've had 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Okay.
And the college English and yearbook. So I've had any variety of those. And yes, during COVID, I did do all of our virtual for the English department, which was, that was interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for that. I wasn't planning on that. The teacher who wanted to do that ended up deciding to retire. And I don't blame her. She made the right decision. But Mr. Thompson called and was like, hey.
By the way.
No, it's like, hey, and here's some news for you.
Yeah.
But it was interesting in a way because I think I got to know some people that I wouldn't have. It was interesting to work with some of the kids from Joy Ranch that had to be on virtual and get to know some of their personalities and that you don't always get to interact with as much in your regular classroom. It was interesting. I think that COVID and virtual, it just made us all so flat. I don't know what other word to call it.
Yeah.
It just made us all really one-dimensional. And, we got to the point where we just wanted to, fill out questions, or we just wanted to, we didn't want to talk anymore. We didn't want to discuss. And I feel like just this year, I'm starting to see a little bit of that break away and go away and kind of go back to a more normal-esque world.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure that you guys probably still hate the phone thing, but I don't think it's been nearly taking phones away from students in the classroom. I don't think it's been nearly as bad as everybody thought it would be.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways it's caused people to have friends again, to talk to people again, to have drama among themselves again, things that had because everybody had become so introverted into their digital worlds. You're binging on Netflix all day, or
that still happens.
Madden NFL, or all these things are happening instead of human interaction. So it's being kind of nice. I'm not going to say it's perfect, and obviously people are not 100% playing by the rules, but but I feel like the people who've been willing to say, hey, I'm cool, I don't need the phone, that it has been, I feel like we have had more conversations this year.
COVID was really interesting. Me and Ethan were at the middle school, so we didn't, when it first started happening, then it was my 9th grade year coming back.
Yeah.
But it was my 8th grade year when we left. And we got to see that from the middle school perspective. Can you talk about the high school situation up here?
Sure. Yeah, because Will left at the end of he missed the end of his 3rd grade year, and Bradley missed the end of 6th grade. So I kind of got to see those from a parent perspective. But yeah, here,
I think it's March 13th. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Friday the 13th.
And again, I had just been traveling, because apparently I tend to travel when world crises occur. We had been in Florida, and we were in St. Augustine, and there was a news report about COVID in Tampa. And I remember Brad was like, well, that doesn't sound good. And I was like, nah, we'd read about it actually on that SOL prep stuff that we use to actively learn. They'd had a thing about it. And I was like, oh, no, we read about that in class. No big deal. We're good. I was like, that's Tampa. We're in St. Augustine. Like, no worries. Everything's fine. And that was maybe the Sunday of that week. Yeah. And then that Friday happened.
NBA shut down that week.
Yeah. It seemed like once the NBA shut down, that's when America
Yeah,
shut down.
absolutely.
It's kind of fun. I don't know if that's a statement of how we are, but people took it seriously after that.
Absolutely. And it was, and I think, again, we were lucky here because we're not crammed in a city. We're not right on top of each other. There weren't, we probably didn't experience 50, 60% of the changes that people who truly lived in urban areas were experiencing. So while it was weird for us, it didn't shut down our lives in the same. I can still go in my
backyard.
Yeah, in the same way, and we were still kind of talking to friends, and but so it was interesting because I'm home with my own kids, trying to help them with stuff, and their teachers are trying to figure out what to do, and we're trying to figure out what to do. So you had that whole series of a month or so, and that wasn't that hard to get through, and then figure out what do you do from there. Because I remember and my room is larger, so I was lucky because I could spread the desk out, but here we are spreading the desk out, and we're wiping down the desk all the time, and the janitors are having to spray them these backpacks, and they're spraying this stuff, and lunch was awful. That was the worst because people had to bring their food to the classroom, and because that's y'all's free time. You need to be able to socialize, and then you're sitting there with a teacher eating lunch, and it was.
Even when I got up here my 9th grade year, we still had to do that for some classes.
Yeah,
I was doing it up until I think
probably 10th
probably
grade.
through 10th grade.
Maybe so, yeah. And that was really awkward for everybody because we didn't want you guys to have to lose your social time, and and also your class isn't who you would have gravitated to have lunch with, so that was rough. So you're sitting in all these far corners with your lunch, and the great mask debate and the politics that went with the mask debate and all this stuff, and was it helping, was it not helping, am I making a statement by wearing or not wearing a mask? I mean, really,
it just got crazy. The beginning of COVID, I'm not saying it's exciting or a good thing, but it is interesting to be a part of that national event, or I guess worldwide event.
Oh yeah.
It's just surreal, I guess is the right word, because the night the NBA shut down, I said, well, let's go to Walmart and get stuff, which is what you should do when there's a national pandemic, is go to a very public place. Yes. People were parking like KFC and Arby's.
Oh yeah.
It was massive. I saw everybody in there that night.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, this is really
like what's happening.
Going down. So.
Well, and I remember the boys posed for like a funny picture in Food City with, they were out of toilet paper, but they had paper towels, and people were buying the paper towels. And I'm like, why did we all think we were going to run out of toilet paper?
Of all things.
How did that get started? But, people rationing and grabbing stuff, and it really was. And then, once the dust kind of settled and we realized, okay, this is kind of where we're at. Now, how do we start doing the things we need to do? Because Bradley was swimming with the year-round swim team, and they started slowly adding meets back, and they're having to wear the mask right up until you get on the diving block, and you're like, really? And
for track we were supposed to wear them up until we got to the starting line.
Cross country that year, we had these little
pockets.
We had to put
them in our pockets.
And we did the back of our, and we get to the starting line and take them off. And then as soon as we crossed the finish line, I had to get
put
them back
out. Yep. So people lost so many swim caps and goggles because the strings from the mask and the goggles and the caps, and the pool at the end of a race would be littered with people's stuff, and didn't get it back on. It was. I mean, all of us were just. I guess people were trying to. Nobody wanted life to stop, but you're trying to figure out what's the best way to continue on with what we had to work with. And I think one thing that we need to revisit now is that we've kept a lot of these COVID rules here at school. that maybe we could remember how we used to do it. And, because used to there was socialization in the morning, people pretty free-flowed in the morning, pretty free-flowed in the afternoons. And I think we could probably start thinking about going back to some of that rather than being so restrictive. If people would just say, hey, these are the safety things that are better under these rules. So if you guys can keep the safe, don't be out crowding the buses and that kind of stuff. But if you can respect the safety parts of it, we could start to give you back some of your socialization parts.
Yeah, I was talking to Mr. Mitchell the other day, and he said that everyone used to get out at 3:15.
Yes.
They didn't have the waves like we do
Yeah,
now.
you did not have the waves. And
That's just wild to me.
That's what I'm saying. And I think that's something to maybe revisit, because I feel like if people just knew these were the things for the bus drivers and for admin at the afternoon, if they knew these were the things that worked better like that, if you want to stay in the halls and socialize, I feel like we could talk about it and figure out a way to give you guys some time to mingle and socialize, providing that people would respect the privilege, which is the other part of the puzzle. But and I mean, maybe that whole rebellion thing comes from the COVID stuff too, that people followed such strict rules for so long that now people are just rebelling over needless things just to be able to do it, just to have a sense of autonomy. I don't know.
Did you send books home during COVID? Because I know at the middle school it's pretty interesting. They were delivering bag lunches
Yes.
through the bus.
Yes.
But they were also delivering, I got homework and books from my teacher, so I would go in there and said, all my books here.
Yeah.
And I had to turn in that book to the bus driver. It was so strange. It was
I
like a
Yeah.
school
never
meal.
had anything like that. I didn't know they
It
did
was
that.
so weird.
They
but,
did.
yeah.
And the bus drivers and the cafeteria
They were
workers, a
great.
major unsung hero of
Yeah.
all of that. And even some of our teacher aides who chipped in and became cafeteria workers and became people who rode the buses. And, those guys were crazy awesome. And the amount of things that they managed, because some teachers were really old school and they did send. I did not. I'm on that cusp of technology, right? But I love technology. And so I like to know, I like to have new things. I've always enjoyed technology. So I wasn't upset about using Google Classroom or those types of things. I kind of, I don't like the fact that we were doing so much reading on a screen.
Yeah. I feel like my vision got worse because I never needed glasses up until COVID.
I now have to wear bifocals. That's why I have these glasses as well. Yeah, because you were staring at screens so much. And I got to the point where I couldn't make it through the day with contacts. So had to switch to the bifocals. But yeah, I think it affected a lot of our vision. Staring at the Chromebooks and the screens. And Mr. Fraser, the librarian, told me one time, and I don't know if I'm quoting his statistic correctly, but it's how I remember him saying it, was that you remember 40% less of what you read on a screen than what you read on paper. Because we tend to skim it and we tend to rush through things on a screen. And also, I mean, our brains are, the psychology of it, of how we take in fonts and words and
Tactile.
Yeah, and so it is a little bit faster to go through words sometimes on a screen, but you're not taking in what you're looking at. I find myself doing that. Like, you look at people's vacation photos on Facebook, and they've been incredible places, and you probably should stop and consider the pictures they shared, but instead you're like, okay, 21, 22, you're scrolling through their pictures instead of stopping and really taking in what they shared, right? So, I feel like digital causes us to rush. But no, I went all Google Classroom, and we tried that world, and we did the best we could.
But those bus drivers, they were great. They saw them every day for close to 3 months.
Oh, yeah. Incredible.
And had a busload of food and stuff and homework and Chromebooks. And
Just thinking back, it's remarkable that was able to be engineered in such a short time.
Absolutely. That, and I've long thought about that, whether I think a lot of teachers were salty that nobody came to teachers to say, hey, how would you invent this wheel?
Yeah.
Right. Instead, and not in our school district in particular, I mean in general, that, what would you see best to proceed for that year after everybody went home? And but I think here, we really did come up with some unique things and some things that were, like you say, people who put packets together and sent home those whole things. I know we've got math teachers here who did like almost like little textbooky things that went home.
And that was real inspiring to see, inspiring the first week.
Yeah.
And then everything
after
devolved
that,
into craziness and everybody started fighting and stuff. But
yeah,
that first week, everybody really came together. And
it really
created
did.
this
I
new
remember
system.
that Friday we got out, we got cultural homerooms, and they gave us all Chromebooks and our Chromebook chargers to take
It
home.
was crazy.
Yes. Yeah,
he
it
put
really.
down a piece of paper. It was Dr. Noel. He says, "Write if you have internet or not."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people were throwing paper in the hallways, clearing out their lockers and stuff.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And teachers were yelling.
Oh, no, it really was
awesome.
crazy. And the internet thing. And I think, too, if you think how far, just as a county, we've come on internet access in the 2 years since that. Because, you know, a lot of us were stuck on the CenturyLink world,
Awful.
which was, you know, only internet in name and how much they billed you for it, not in actual ability to use it. And I had that problem. You know, my house sits within sight of US 58, but we only had CenturyLink internet available or US Cellular. So I'm home teaching, and a lot of times I'm logged into my own classroom on both platforms. I'm logged in on CenturyLink and I'm logged in on my own cell phone data, just so that I won't be completely cut off from my own class, because a lot of times the CenturyLink would freeze and you know. And then swimming continued, and we're trying to teach. And so I was really good friends with the people at the McDonald's in Mount Airy, because McDonald's had the free Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So you go in and sit in their parking lot or sit in McDonald's. And we read The Crucible in the parking lot at McDonald's. And, you know, and you try to make the best of it. You knew it wasn't going to be perfect. You knew it wasn't going to be the experience you'd have in a classroom. But you tried to hit as many highlights as you could and get people through as many things as you could find ways to get through them.
I feel like that year, that was not an academic education year, but a life lesson education year.
100%.
Because I learned a lot that year, but maybe not in the way that most teachers would want to hear.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because you learn, I think it taught us about ourselves too, about our abilities to organize and you look at our homes, like your house isn't set up for a place to work.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't have a good place to put a computer. You didn't have a good place to spread out your papers. You know, your dog is constantly squeaking a toy. You know,
I had a 2-year-old sister at the time too.
Yeah.
So her turned 3 that year.
Absolutely.
Wanted to do everything.
Everything that you were doing.
So having an online class was difficult, but I think it really helped us especially with the dual enrollment online classes in the
Yes.
summer and even here in the library.
We don't even
I
blink
was
about
used to that. No,
Yeah.
so I just went in and did it. I never had to think about
Yeah.
it. Just what we were doing.
I do
It
think
does.
that was beneficial.
Yeah, because you get in your time management and you get to where you realize, hey, if I put this off, it's going to pile up. And if I put off 2 or 3 things, they're all going to pile up. And yeah, and so you learn, you kind of get how much work you can do and how much time. And yeah, so it did. And I think college is fortunately, however you like it, I think we're going to see a rise in those types of classes, because it does give them the flexibility to offer, you know, way more things than they did before, and to bring them to people who couldn't have those classes before. But it also takes the internal motivation to
Also,
get.
to people up at Virginia Tech, even people on campus are doing online classes.
Yeah.
Like I think one out of the 4 classes one girl was taking, she had 3 online classes.
Yeah.
And she was on campus.
On campus, yeah.
So that's crazy to me that they're living there but taking most of
Absolutely.
the course load in their dorm room.
Yeah, and we've got even teachers here in the building who are doing the online
Yeah.
with full classes.
Right.
Because I think the community college system thrives on the adjunct professor who can pick up 2 or 3 classes here and there.
Wouldn't
and-
exist without it.
Yeah, absolutely not. And so it does also provide an avenue for a lot of other people to offer some classes and do things like that. So
And for teachers to get that experience. Too.
yeah, I mean it's good and bad. I don't think a lot of there's some subject areas that lend themselves to online way more than others, because some are easily autonomous,
Yeah.
and some really need the ability to like interact with a professor and ask questions, and virtual doesn't prohibit you from doing that, but it does put the ball in your court a lot more as a student. The student responsibility goes up.
Yeah, Luke and
Yeah.
I took a computer applications class a couple summers ago, and I didn't need a professor for that one.
No, because
Yeah.
you basically just kind of went on your own.
Yes.
And a lot of these, most of the online classes, it's assigned reading, a writing section, and then a quiz every week.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it follows that same. You write a paper, you read the section, take a quiz. You can get it done quickly.
Yeah.
And once you get used to it, you just
Absolutely. I took a continuing ed class in Photoshop, and I thought, well, this will be, A, I like Photoshop. B, I know Photoshop well, so this will be a fun class, easy renewal points. And that was the hardest class. I spent hours on that class because the assignments were so intricate. And
Right.
and again, I did learn a lot, but that was one of those that put it all on the student. Like you were, and you didn't really. That one wasn't one that it didn't have a time to interact with a professor or things like that. They're courses that were designed for like working adults to be autonomous courses. So you really had to struggle through on your own. But I put in some hours on that class. But it's cool that you can do that.
Yeah.
I was looking at the library. I enjoy the Libby app on my phone from the public library, and they have that universal class. I don't know if y'all have looked at that, but universal class is free with your library card, and it has all kinds of random continuing education classes.
Have you checked out Project Gutenberg?
I love Project Gutenberg.
Yeah, it feels kind of low, but it's totally legal.
Oh yeah, because it's public domain.
Yeah, so.
Yep. You have to be careful though with public domain because I don't think you're going to run into it an awful lot, but they're not necessarily authorized versions anymore. So from time to time, people,
especially the Dostoevsky translation, sometime on there, it's like foreign languages. Me and Ethan's read some Dostoevsky. Am I saying it right, Ethan?
Dostoevsky.
Yes.
Dostoevsky. He always gets on to me when
I don't even
know. But just especially some of those, you realize the translation's that great. I always go with Penguin Classics because
Penguin's a pretty solid.
I don't like Penguin Classics translations. They're too wordy, I think.
They are wordy, but they're trustworthy, I would say.
Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah.
You know it's right, but
if
I can find another translation, I'll use it.
And, that's an interesting thing too, because as we're getting more into the copyright expiring on things that people are familiar with, because Gatsby came into the public domain 2 years ago?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, last year. All this Walt Disney content that's out there that they're fighting to find loopholes to keep it out of the public domain. It's going to be interesting as more of the pop culture products start to come into the public domain.
Those classics too, they're still big sellers at Barnes and Noble.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're expensive too.
Yes, the Barnes and Noble versions.
They're pretty. I think the Grapes of Wrath.
They make those great classics.
Easily like 30 bucks.
Absolutely, because I'll go in and look at those and be like, I'd love to have a shelf of all those, but
But
but I also have some common sense. But they're beautiful.
And they're making money off of them too.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
I think the folio editions of different books.
Yeah, the folios are great.
And you do wonder when that stuff kind of people always want
physical
that physical book and nice books too. But if you give people the option, a portion of them are going to take the.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you guys are shoppers at McKay's.
Yeah, I love.
Oh my
McKay's.
gosh,
love the McKay's.
Me and Ethan have actually taken trips down there together to get books.
McKay's is a great place for used books, records, old video games, comic books, your Magic cards, your Pokemon. I mean, if you want it, they've got it at McKay's. We actually went to the new one. I'm really sad. They closed the one in Greensboro.
They did?
Yes, and they've opened one. It's at the outlet malls now in Mebane. So it's like a 30-minute drive from where the old one was. And we went in there the other day, and it was just slammed with people.
Yeah, I bet.
And part of me said, this is great that people want to be at a bookstore, but part of me was like, I really miss when I could actually just look in the aisle and there weren't 20 people in one aisle. There were two. And,
Do you like the one in Winston?
So the new one in Mebane is just like the one in Winston. Okay. It's almost the same. And the Winston one is great, but I always liked the quirkiness of the Greensboro one. It was much smaller, and
I remember when McKay's was in the old building in Winston.
That
was cool.
Over by Thruway. But the Winston one is great. But the Mebane one is. I'm glad. Again, I should never be upset that people want to go buy books.
Right.
Like that's not an upsetting thing, but it was definitely different.
It was like your own little secret.
Yeah,
place.
I'm like, guys, what are y'all doing here?
Yeah.
In the contemporary fiction aisle. Like, why are there 20 people in contemporary fiction? Yeah. So, it was interesting. But yeah, Winston from now on. That's a hot tip for everybody. Don't go to the one in Mebane.
I remember the first time I went in there, and I used to love the Star Wars, the expanded universe.
Oh yeah.
They call it Legends now, but
yeah.
The old EU stuff. I don't like the new canon stuff as much, but the old EU stuff was great.
Yeah.
But they were expensive at Barnes and Nobles, and they didn't have everything.
And there's a Barnes and Noble right beside McKay's.
Yes.
I went to McKay's, and they had 2 whole shelves full of them for like 50 cents a dollar.
Yeah.
It's
I think I got
best.
40 or 50 that day.
Absolutely.
So just
yeah, I have to restrict myself, and you guys see the free library cart in the cafeteria, and that's one of the places I get a lot of stuff. I'll go to McKay's, and they have the free bins out there.
Yes, I have so many books.
Yeah, so I'll go through the free bins and try to find stuff that is of interest, perhaps, to high school kids. And
you sell too at McKay's?
I have never, because I have a real problem letting go of books.
Yeah.
And
people will give me old books.
yeah,
They're not mine, so I don't have really a problem.
taking
Old
on.
westerns and stuff, and I've
Yeah.
got them $60 in store credit, and $60 in McKay's, you can clean for it.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah, it's I do have a problem letting go of books.
Me
If,
too.
if you guys were in here in my room, you would see that it's all 3 walls are lined with books.
Yeah.
But we have that cool free library back there. That's one thing I'm really proud of that we do here.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that Susan Fairhurst actually started that project through
So it is
her-
through Rotary.
Yeah, through
I didn't realize
Rotary and through her own kindness of wanting to do that. And she was actually, for several years, able to do grants that went K-12. And then the Twin County Chamber of Commerce. So I work with the Chamber for Smoke on the Mountain. But the Chamber does a lot of other things, and they've recently got the Dolly Parton Imagination Library to
Yeah,
all of our
yeah.
zip codes in Carroll County. So if you have younger children and they're not registered, you definitely need to get on the Imagination Library and get registered. And if you don't have younger children, free plug, you can sponsor a year's worth of books for about $15.
Wow.
So, and the Chamber has the links for those donations. If you look on Facebook or follow Twin County Imagination Library, for about $15, you could get books for a kid for a year. So if you're looking for something to, a feel-good something, then feel free to check that out as an opportunity. But we have that here, and so yeah, McKay's is a major supplier of our free books, and then we use First Book, which is a company that's for Title I schools. And so First Book provides, your publisher overruns and different books that we were able to get throughout the year. And so I'm glad we can do that for our students. And there's actually also some books back there that are from Rotary. Ethan
Yeah.
helped with these.
Yeah.
That we need to get delivered. The Rotary Interact Club, which I've been our sponsor always as well for that.
Yeah, I
I
wanted
guess
to ask about that.
always is the theme of the day here. I've always been an Interact sponsor, but one of our former Interact students was Kayla Payne, and she became a librarian in Stanton, and she's now in charge of Interact for all of our Rotary district, 7570. And so she wanted to do a literacy project this year. And so she was able to get books donated, and the kids wrapped them with some coloring books and supplies and things. And we have those to get distributed. So we really got a lot of literacy opportunities. It's been nice. Little free libraries are popping up several places around the
There's one a
community.
mile down the road from me.
Yeah, so those are
Are you taking
fun.
any from it?
Yeah, and I've also given books back.
Yeah, always, free libraries are great. Take your stuff and put them in the free
Yeah.
library. The boys, they swim at Reeves in Mount Airy, and there's a free library down there at the Greenway Park there, and they always have incredible good books in that free library. I'll check it from time to time, and really cool stuff pops up in those things. So the fun of the randomness of the free library is a cool thing. That's something I'd like to see us maybe keep pushing to have those in more public places. It'd be cool to have one at the farmer's market
Yeah.
even, and
That'd be cool.
some of those places.
There is one at the.
Yeah, actually there is
farmer's
one in the
market.
first market.
The
Luke and I
farmer's market.
Oh, okay.
got a few books from it. The
Okay.
one.
Oh, that's right.
by
It's
the
inside.
interstate. Yeah,
it's inside. Yeah. I was thinking of the new one that Hillsville has built off Main Street. That
Okay,
it would be
yeah.
cool to have one there too,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the Time Factory's got one, and they're around, but it's a really cool little thing.
It is.
So,
And there are a
yeah.
few apps that you can use to locate them.
yeah.
too.
I was actually reading a Google story the other day about one that was kind of just on a road in the middle of nowhere, and there were no buildings, no stores, no nothing. It's just a long stretch of road, and it has a free library in the middle of it. So people were posting pictures of their journey to the random free library. So no, I don't let go of books, but my mom doesn't let go of books either, and she recently has purged some that she sent to our free library as well. So, but I feel like she's getting rid of a family member every time she gets rid of books.
I was fortunate enough, back in fall, there was an older lady that passed away, and she used to be a publisher in New York City.
Wow.
And she never got married. I thought she was married, but her husband died a long time ago.
Okay.
And her family wasn't really close to her. So she didn't have nobody to give her books to. And they said she told him that she wanted somebody that would that enjoyed books and wouldn't just throw them away.
Okay.
She said, "Do you want them?" I said, "Sure." I said, "How many?" They said, "There's 2,000.
Oh my gosh.
So I get there and they're all classics.
Wow.
Nonfiction, stuff I enjoy. So I was like,
Jackpot.
and I feel bad. There's so many.
Yeah.
I forget even what I have.
Wow.
So they're down in my basement. I don't have room for them a lot. I know I can't keep them all, but I feel bad getting rid of them because she wanted somebody that'll keep them and read them.
To keep them, yeah.
But I calculate if I read one a week, it would take me almost 80 years.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
just, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm thinking about donating some to the Carroll County Library or maybe the high school library.
Yeah. Wonder how many she read.
Probably
Most
a lot
of them, because she wrote her name in the ones she read.
Yeah. We actually have back there, Dennis Ward, a fine Rotarian, was doing an auction for CG and Gene Acres. And Dennis, if you've ever been to an auction with Dennis, you know not to make eye contact with him and let him know you're in the audience, because he, near the end of the day, they had a large collection of books that hadn't shown any interest. No one had been interested in them. And so I just happened to be standing at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I joke because I'm glad Dennis did this for me. But he said, "All right, I see that Shannon Dalton just bid $5 for all these books." And he was like, "Thanks." And he was like, "Sold." And so I got an entire van load of books from that auction for $5. And we've been giving those away for quite some time. That were from Jean's library. And Jean is still alive, lives in North Carolina now, but she had an extensive library as well. And as to the tune of an entire van load of books. So we've had those books that we've been, and any of you who've gotten them from the cart, you may have seen her name in the books, but yeah, same thing. She had her name in them.
What is you realize it took her an entire lifetime to collect those books.
Oh,
And I got them in an afternoon. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of crazy.
It is, isn't it? You know, to think about it. But yeah, books are definitely important to me, and I collect. My house is way full of them, and they're stacked in corners, and you don't have enough time. Is the sad thing. You're looking at them thinking, I'll get through it all, and you know,
you'll get a new one.
you'll get a new one. I started at Christmas. Brad got me a biography of Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, and I've been working my way through that one.
That's cool.
It's interesting reading.
Yeah.
So
One of my favorite books I've ever read came from the free book cart.
yeah,
Same.
Mine too.
yeah,
Saturday
A Time
night.
to Kill by John Grisham.
Oh, yeah.
about the little book cart.
yeah.
And I picked it up at lunch because I heard about this John Grisham guy.
Yeah.
And I finished it in 2 days. I love John Grisham.
He's a quick read always. And we actually had a bunch of those at one time, and they almost all of those got gone pretty quickly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, heard from different people in your class now that you're teaching Our Town.
Yes.
I read it last year, and I heard of it this week. I actually read it, picked it up today, and read it during one of my free vlogs. I loved that book.
Yeah, Our
It has a
Town.
real sense of community. I
Absolutely.
think it's special. Can you talk about Our Town a little bit?
Sure.
Why it's
And
important.
I love Our Town, and I do always make a point to read it, even sometimes at the expense of other things that I would like to read. I think in Ethan's class we ran out of time.
Oh no, we read Our Town.
Well, we read Our Town, but I wanted to read Gatsby
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
we
We ran
didn't
out of
have a
time
chance.
we ran out of time for the bootleggers, but we got in Our Town. You know, that is such an important play, and it's so simple. You know, it comes at that time in American literature where you kind of had that focus on regionalism and on characters, and like a focus on just honing in on character, and that plays such a great example of that, because the characters are so simple. They're normal people, they're average people, and their lives are not anything out of the ordinary. They're just like us. And I think that is exactly what he wanted when he wrote the play. When Thornton Wilder wrote Our Town, I feel like he had to, because there's no set, there's no scenery. Obviously, he mentions place names, and we have a sense of New England from that. But you also it's easy to put yourself in their shoes. Yeah. And even though it's 1901, it's easy to modernize it into your own life. And I love that play always. I played Julia Gibbs for the Twin County Arts Council and in Our Town, because Wesley Harmon, who's now on tour with Paw Patrol Live, Wesley conned me into being in Our Town. It's my one and only theater appearance.
You showed us the production.
Yes, and but it was fun to do that and to do a little community theater. But I think that play is important because it really has this message. I have deep thoughts. Both of you know I'm always alone in my deep thoughts. Maybe people think about them after the fact, but that this notion that each one of us is important. We're valuable. Because he talks about the time capsule, and he talks about how in all of these centuries of people, we didn't record our daily life. And we don't know, what did they have for dinner? What did they wear? What were their trivial conversations? What was their gossip? We don't know these things. And that's fine. The history of man went on just fine without it. And, but then you get in, and he says, in a play that's set in 1901, that he wants to put the play in the time capsule because it's a representation of that daily life. And that's so cool. But, we get to the point now where we're so overrepresented in our daily life, Some people are sending Snapchats, all the time, every little detail of our day. And so it's a real shift in humanity to go from recording nothing to recording everything. But somewhere in the middle of that is that notion that we are important. And that even if your life is simple, even if your life is not as a celebrity or as a big name or as somebody who goes down in history, that you mattered, right? There's that letter that Rebecca talks about, that her friend gets a letter that's addressed to the friend, and Jane Crowfoot and the Crowfoot Farm and Grover's Corners and Sutton County and New Hampshire. And then it goes on to, the earth, the universe, the mind of God. And then you go to the end in the cemetery where they're talking about how the guy says that his son, who was a sailor, used to say that it took thousands of years for the speck of dust of light to get to Earth from the stars. And you think about, what is the message of that the letter goes out from one person to the universe, right? And that the universe comes back in a speck of light to one person, right? That singular experience. And, I think I take different things from stuff each year I read it. It's something different each time. But, I kind of said to the guys this year, and I don't know that I quite solidified my point, but the stage manager says in that once in a million times people's lives are interesting, right? And I kind of thought to myself, that's a gift in its own. Yeah. To know that you could that your life was, and I don't want to use ordinary in a bad sense. I don't mean ordinary in that you did boring things or that your life wasn't important, but that you were able to conduct life as you expected it, right? That you went from beginning to end and that things went more or less how you thought they should go. Like, that's a gift, right? How many people get to say that they went from 0 to 80 or 90 or 100 and it went more or less as they thought it should, right? That's kind of we take that for granted, and we think that those things, that a life of well lived we don't appreciate it like we should. So I just think that play is so important to think that, I hope that people take away from it to realize what you're doing is important, even if what you're doing seems small to you. It's important, and if it's what makes you happy and it's what fulfills your life, then you're in the right place doing the right thing. You shouldn't feel discontent with what you're doing. And also to appreciate the people around you, because I think that play also reminds us that things change.
Yeah.
Like this podcast that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
These are going to be really valuable recordings to people at some point in time. And people are going to look back and be like, wow, I never thought that I would, miss this person, or that they wouldn't be here to talk to, or that I would forget this memory, or that, that slice of time that I wouldn't remember it, that's important to take that time, to take time to be part of your community, get off your phone and be with your friends, don't make an excuse when a friend calls, like take their call, go and visit people and spend time with people. Those are, giving your time is not easy sometimes. We're all running from here to there to everywhere, and I'm just as guilty as the next person. But if we can remind ourselves of the importance of that. So those are things I love about that play.
What they say in the introduction, some people say it's about nothing, but it's about the most interesting story in the world, people's lives.
Absolutely.
And you really see the passage of time in that book, how everything, the world keeps on moving. These people are here for just a short period of time, and that's their story.
Absolutely.
And I think, who's the little boy at the beginning of the book?
Wally is the little brother.
No, he delivers newspapers.
Oh, Joe Crow.
Yeah, Joe Crow. And you see him, he's like, well, he's going to die in the war.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
Yeah, right off the bat.
It really makes it a lot more special than you see him as a little boy. He's going to end up dying in the trenches. It's just, you see this, it's just,
yeah, it really is. And, I played Mrs. Gibbs, and she dies on the first page before you've even met her. But to think about, where people are going. And when Emily goes back, I think that to me is one of the most poignant scenes when she says, oh, there's the fence around our house, and there's Mr. Morgan's drugstore before he changed it. And, why I didn't realize how beautiful my mom was, right? Like those things that you're so busy doing that you don't think about it.
I forget where the saying comes from, but it's not the big things I remember. It's the tiny.
Yeah.
It's the million little things.
Absolutely.
The million little moments that people share together or experience. That's what people will really take away.
That's kind of cool, because that was the theme of my very last yearbook, was a million little things, or 1,000. I think we did 1,000 little things, but it was like little. It was that the little moments are what adds up over time. Absolutely. Because it goes back to what I was saying. We put on ourselves the American dream that, you can do whatever you want to do. And that's certainly true. Yeah. But it's okay if whatever you want to do is not, big and bold and brassy. I mean, it's fine if what you find to do for yourself is smaller or less flashy, or it takes all these things to make the world go round. Yep. And
I hope your class is able to take away that, because I know I did, and that's why I went back and read it, and many of them have talked about it a lot.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's a short little simple play, but such a deep message.
That play and The Crucible have solidified my love for plays.
Awesome. Yeah, The Crucible too.
I love The Crucible.
And The Crucible is another one that you get something different every time.
Yeah, you do.
Every time. And I think it has to do with the personalities in the room, the people who are reading it. Yeah. Because, sometimes you're thinking about, I've got a friend I always think about when I read that play that said, she talks about how the one person who never lied, Elizabeth Proctor, right? And then the one time that it's on the line for her, the one time when her lie matters, and she chooses to lie instead of tell the truth. And what would have happened to that story if she hadn't? Right? What happens to a lie? Where does it go? Like, I think I've asked y'all both that question in class, like a simple lie, right? How's my hair? Oh, it's great. Yeah, your hair looks great. Does that, is that okay? Right? Does that just go away after that question, or does it, how does it ripple out? I always go back to the transcendentalist a lot, that the notion that everything we do is some kind of ripple effect on people it one way or another. And it's kind of hard to argue that it's not.
Yeah, no.
Maybe not the same kind of giant effect that maybe they kind of saw the cosmic scheme of it, but definitely we bounce off of each other in all kinds of ways. But,
I think that's a good note to start asking our final questions on.
Yes. All right.
And what advice do you have to someone considering pursuing a career in English or in journalism?
And go for it, even though it's changing, even though, you're going to have to be part of redefining it. Because I think we still need journalists. We've got to have journalists, people who are willing to dig in and get the stories. And I don't know where these people, I don't know where we go with it. But local communities need journalists. On a national level, we need journalists. Like we need these guys and gals. So go for it, but be prepared. Be prepared to take what comes up. Be prepared to go in new directions. I think we're in such a global world now, right? Maybe you're prepared to travel, to pack up and go where the stories are, or where the news is at, and where things are leading you. We were having an interesting discussion in the hall the other day about how news was never not biased.
Right.
It was never not biased. In the 1800s, you could buy a paper for whatever point of view you wanted to have. You could print it all, and you had your own papers. And I was saying that, you kind of go to Walter Cronkite, who I think was the one who really tried to make it seem like journalism was like a shared, non-biased, factual only. Not that Walter Cronkite wasn't also, with his bias, and I'm too young to be of the Cronkite era. I'm a Dan Rather era person. But this notion that it was sort of a unifying thing. But you think about the time period there with the Kennedy assassination and all those things that did unify people. And news is kind of branching and splitting back out into partisan things now. And these new medias allow that. Yeah. They allow for those things to happen, and they allow for alternative voices, and they allow for people who don't have a big budget to be heard. Yeah. I say go for it, absolutely, but just be ready for the ride, because there's no telling where it'll take you. But go for it. English, again, same thing. We got to society has to keep producing our stories. We have to keep telling our stories, and we need those people who are doing that too. I have to believe, and even if I'm lying to myself, I have to believe that these things need to be important to society. Yeah, so go for it.
Yeah.
Go to the colleges that are going to get you ahead in those fields. Try to look and see who's innovating in journalism, and see who's going to bring you the things that are really going to help you have a career there, and not just have it fizzle out into something that requires a master's and requires a doctorate, and that's fine if you want those too, but see who's innovating in the fields and see what's out there, and go and explore that. Absolutely.
I have two final questions.
Okay.
First, what is your advice for young people just making their way in the world?
Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck. You're going to make it. It's going to be fine. These are changing times. And I guess I need an answer to that question, because I've got two of my own that need to go out and do things pretty soon. But stay true to yourself. Know who you are. Know what you enjoy doing. Don't try to force yourself into a hole that you don't fit into. The square peg and the round hole. Don't do things just for money. Right? Money's important. We need to live. We need to not be in our parents'. I don't have a basement, so Bradley can't. So he's out of luck. We don't need to be in our parents' bonus room. But don't just pick because of the salary. Don't just pick because it seems stable. And don't just pick because it's close by. Do things. And when you're younger, go out and explore and do these things, because you're going to have way more time than you think to be old and be stable. And so use that time. Go and travel. I think about Jessie Rasco right now, who's had such an amazing semester. I don't know if you guys know Miss Rasco's daughter, a science teacher here at our school. Her daughter's been doing an architecture program in Europe this semester through Tech. Amazing. Yeah. She's been all over Europe. She's done incredible things, and incredible experience for her future in architecture. Yeah. So use that time now where you have energy and you're young. Get out and do those things. And the time will come to settle down, and the time will come to be a homebody. Plenty of time for that. So go out and do all those things that you can cross off the bucket list early, and make it happen as best you can.
You mentioned earlier about how these interviews could be important to people's families in the future. If your family in 50 years is listening to this interview, what would you tell them?
Oh, wow. Hard question. See, this is why y'all are the hard-hitting journalists of Carroll County. Oh, that is hard. I hope you're happy. I hope they're happy. I hope that you're gonna make me sad, doing important things and that they're enjoying life. Because, take it back to our town. The important thing is to be happy, right? And not in a selfish way, but in a way that's fulfilling. Yeah, absolutely. 50 years. I might still be here. We can listen to it in the nursing home. There you go. So, good times. You think about that time capsule that we dug up, that I showed you guys, that they pulled up in Hillsville. I think that was 2018. And that was only 50 years. And I remember thinking to myself, hey, 50 years, like, that's kind of lame. Why did we not leave it longer? Yeah. But that is a long time.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. A lot of time can pass. Yeah, what would I say to them? Be happy, guys. Yeah. And do things that make you happy.
Our last question. It might be a bit of a cliche, but we like to ask every interviewee that is, what is the meaning of life to you?
I knew this one was coming.
Yeah, of course.
What is the meaning of life?
It's not a surprise anymore to people.
We can answer all these questions with our town, right? Because they quote, the stage manager says there was the Middle West poet, and the Middle West poet is going to be, it's from Lucinda Matlock. When she says she says, degenerate sons and daughters, life is too much for you. You get to have life to love life. And the stage manager quotes that quote. But yeah, what is the meaning of life? Is that you have to have life to love life, right? You need to be doing things that are meaningful to you, because time is limited, time is short. So get out there and be involved and do the things that matter and help people. I hope that's what I do, to volunteer, to be out there giving. And, maybe I should mention Jane Muncie here, who was a person who was so selfless. And I think the meaning of life to her was that she was constantly giving to others. And then having met her sisters after her death, that they're constantly giving to others. And that you use your gifts to the best of your ability to help others around you, right? To send people a little further down the road than where they were when you met them. They say, it's the Bible verse that to him who much is given, much is required, right? So if you have the ability to give, then help people do things. Be there more than just in word. All of these things can be answered with literature quotes, right? Because the Rose says that to cast your whole influence, not just your words, right? Be there. So I think life is maybe it's not the meaning of life, but it's most meaningful when you're involved with things, when you're helping others, when you have community, when you surround yourself with people who are working for a greater good. For others to just get out there and be involved and do things, because on the sidelines is no good place for anybody. But the sideline is huge. The sideline of life is huge, and there's room for everybody to find a place to step up. There's room for all of us to do something that helps ourselves and helps others and makes the world a better place in little ways. Every little thing counts. So did I answer the question, or did I beat around the bush? But yeah, help others. And do what you can with what you've been given. Because and don't tell yourself you haven't been given something, because you have. And you may not have figured it out yet, but it'll come to you, and you'll know. So when you find out, do it, and don't hold back. Make it happen.
Thank you, Ms. Dalton.
Ms. Dalton, it's been an honor to speak with you.
Awesome. This has been great conversation.
We
I feel like I'm back in the old radio days.
Yeah, well,
we
pretty
are
close as far as things go.
Love it.